Welcome to the Arizona Department of Transportation State Route 347 Union Pacific Railroad public meeting. Say that 3 times fast. We want to thank you. This is a wonderful outcome, and we want to thank you for your time this evening. Again, we're going to try and get you out of here. We know it's hot, it's summer, you've got things to do. But this is an important project for this community. And my name is Paki Rico. I am with ADOT Community Relations, and I've had the privilege of working with the city of Maricopa on this project. And I just want to say this has been a great community to work with. Now, just quick housekeeping. If you need to use the restroom, the women's is this way to my left, your right. Men's is that way. What I want to do is introduce our project team members for you that you'll get to meet with. But first, one of our big partners is the Federal Highway Administration, and we have 2 representatives with us this evening, Miss Eunice Chan. Eunice? I don't know, there she is in the back. And Mr. Tom Dietering next to her. Federal Highway Administration is one of our funding partners, and you'll have an opportunity to meet with them as well. In addition, I'd like to introduce the ADOT project team members for this. We have Mr. John Dixon here to my left, our environmental coordinator, Emily Lester, back there, our ADOT right-of-way agent, Mr. Dave Edwards, and of course, our wonderful consultant from EPS Group, Mr. Elijah Williams. Other members of the study team are wearing these badges. Just because of time, I don't want to introduce all of them, but we're all wearing these, and again, after the presentation, we ask that you please meet with us to discuss your issues. We do have several elected officials in the office. Sorry, it's not my office. In your office this evening. I'm still getting the hang of wearing reading glasses, sorry. So with us this evening is our mayor of the city of Maricopa, Mayor Price. Thank you for being here. We also have our vice mayor, Mr. Marvin Brown. Thank you. Our council member, Ms. Peggy Chapados. Another council member, Mr. Vincent Manfredi. We also have from the city of Maricopa, city manager Gregory Rose. And I have to mention our wonderful city of Maricopa partner on this project, Mr. Bill Fay. And finally, from the Pima County, I'm from Pima County, sorry. Pinal County Supervisor, Mr. Anthony Smith. If I missed anyone, please let me know, and I can introduce you later on in the presentation. So with that, again, one more reminder, please hold your questions. We're going to give you a presentation. And then we're going to have you meet with the study team members. That will be the meat of our public meeting this evening. I am now going to introduce Mr. John Dixon, our project manager.
Thank you, Paki. On behalf of the ADOT project team, I'd like to thank you for coming to our meeting tonight. We have brought several of our technical experts with us tonight so that at the end of this presentation, if you have some specific questions, I think we have the expertise to be able to answer most of them. As you're well aware, this is a very important project for the city of Maricopa, and this project is now funded with a combination of funds, including a Tiger grant that was awarded this past spring. We're now into development of the project, and we're looking to wrap up the development package by the next end of May, and looking forward to construction start in the following October. I'm not going to give away too much of Elijah's spiel here because he's got a lot of information to present to you. But again, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We do have, like I said, I'll reiterate, we have most of our technical experts here that can help answer questions after we get done with this. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our designer, Mr. Elijah Williams from EPS Group. Thank you.
Wow, applause. I never get applause. I'm just the engineer, I'm not an elected official, but thank you. I am just excited to see how many people are here. I don't know how many of you came to the public meetings that we did during the course of the study, but some of you are nodding, yes. But this has got to be at least double, maybe triple the number of people we ever had at a prior one. So this is fabulous. Thank you for being here and participating in this. Hopefully tonight, by the end of this presentation, I'll have answered most of your questions. It sounded like as I went around and talked to different people at the different displays that I think a lot of the questions were answered, and they will be in this presentation. But feel free at the end, if you still have questions or you'd like to have them answered, write them down on a comment card like Paki said, or come visit with one of the team afterwards. So what I want to do first is kind of go through and outline what we're going to talk about tonight. And specifically for many of you, this might be new to you, or you might have just heard about it from neighbors or others. And so I wanted to go through and talk about how it was we got to this particular place in time with this particular project. So some of this might be review for you, but I think it helps set the stage for why it is that we're doing what we're doing now as far as some of the revisions that were made from the original study. So we've done the introduction of the team. Again, the purpose of the meeting is to inform you and get feedback from you so we understand what your concerns or suggestions might be. We're going to talk about the purpose and need. We're going to talk about how we went through some of these original alternatives, how we evaluated them, how we ended up with the recommendation that we had, and why it is that we felt the need to go back and make some further revisions to that original recommendation to this project. So then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that happen next. I know a lot of you are questioning, okay, what happens from here? And we'll talk about that as well. So we talked about who the project team is. This just kind of shows that again. These are the purposes of this meeting. It's to give you a chance to visit with us, to provide input, to hear what we're planning to do, and to answer your questions. So the project area, it's right here. We're in it as we sit here today. It's this area where State Route 347 intersects the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. And we studied kind of a broad area originally. The purpose of that was to make sure that we incorporated any types of issues or potential options that might be available to us. And to kind of elaborate on this project area, you can see, here's the high school, there's an Amtrak station here, 347, Honeycutt, Maricopa, Casa Grande Highway, and we're all sitting right there right now. Other things to know about the project area is we are inside of what's called a Heritage District. It's a redevelopment district. It's outlined there in the dashed blue line. And we're about a half mile away from the Akshan Indian community. So the purpose of this project was to evaluate potential grade-separated crossings of the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. And grade-separated simply means it's bridged. That's a bridge. And then look at solutions that would improve access, mobility, and address congestion on State Route 347. And the reason we're doing this, we identify a bunch of different needs. And for most of you, this is probably not new. You all know why this is needed. But there's been a huge spike in population here in Maricopa. It's grown dramatically. There's a lot of traffic on State Route 347 today, around 31,000 vehicles. And projections take it up into the mid-60,000 vehicles a day. And of course, we have the Union Pacific Railroad tracks that come through here. There's 40 to 60 trains a day. They come through at a high speed. It's projected for as many as 100 a day, as well as additional sets of tracks. We also have the Amtrak station that's there that comes through, and when passengers embark or disembark, then it blocks the road. And so what we did a couple of years ago, when we were doing the studies, we came back and we said, okay, we're going to look at all these different potential alternatives. And there were 10 that came through, and we talked to you as the public about them a couple of years ago. 3 of them came from an original study that the city initiated back in 2007 that looked at what might be done to establish a bridge here. And the remainder were things that were developed before. And whenever we do one of these, we always look at what's called a no-build alternative. And that just answers the question, are we doing the right thing by building something at all, or should we just leave it alone? And so we always ask that question as kind of a back check when we look at these things. And so these are all small, and the intent is not to talk about these, but to talk about where we're going from here. But just so you know, there were a bunch of different options that were looked at, and there were a variety of different configurations all over the place. And in specific, some of these were as a result of comments that we heard from you as the public. Specifically, this alternative G said, well, why don't you just bypass the whole thing and go around? And so we tried to do that, but it became very expensive to do. And we took these 10 alternatives, and we went through a screening process, and we scored them. The worst performance got a 1, and the best performance got a 5, and we rated them based on all kinds of different criteria, how it affects drainage, how it affects physical and natural resources, how much right-of-way they would take, are there conflicts with utilities, how well do they operate under traffic, and we assessed all of these different things and scored them, and there were 3 that came out of this. Alternative E, F2, and H scored the highest. We said, okay, we need to look a lot more closely at these and decide which one of these is the one that we should really press forward with. So that's what we did. And we refined those alternatives, and again, they're a little difficult to see, but they're here. And when we looked at these then in a lot more detail, and these drawings were more developed, similar to the ones that you might have seen at the tables or the boards prior to the meeting. And we evaluated them, again, based on a bunch of different criteria, some environmental criteria, some engineering criteria. We looked at the cost to build these different facilities. We looked at how they might affect access to businesses or residences, and we tried to incorporate all this stuff for these 3 alternatives and then assess which would be the one that would be best and the one that we would recommend. And so alternative E, when we looked at it, we didn't recommend this one. There were several reasons. One, it had the biggest right-of-way impacts. It had a lot of residential, a lot of business, commercial impacts. It cost the most. And one of the key things that's important here, because it affects other alternatives, was the city of Maricopa, as you know, there's a lot of commuter traffic that goes from here up towards the Phoenix metro area and then back again. The intersections of Maricopa Casa Grande Highway and Honeycutt Road are only 300 feet apart. You can't put 2 signals together that close. It'll wreck the traffic operations. It'll just fall apart. So we had to either spread them apart wider or combine them together. And the option was to combine them together. And when we did that, there were so many cars coming this way that wanted to turn and come this way, turn left. Left turns damage an intersection. Because when you're waiting there and there's a signal and everybody's turning left, everybody else has to stop and wait. And it really increases the delay at the intersection. So you try and avoid left turns as much as you can. And this one had so many that it resulted in what's called a level of service F. And when we score roads, we score them just like you get grades in school. You want to get A's. That's the best. And if you get F's, that's not good. And so this one actually scored an F from a traffic operations perspective, from a level of service perspective. And we said, well, that's not very good. And the right-of-way impacts were too high. And so we didn't want to recommend this one. So then we looked at alternative F2, and it was a lot better. It had a lot lower cost, a lot fewer right-of-way impacts. But again, we ended up with this same type of intersection problem where the 2 intersections, when they were combined, got a level of service F. And I should say that this is during rush hour traffic. This is peak rush hour traffic that we look at. We don't look at, how does it do at 2 o'clock in the morning? That's not very valuable. So we look at, what does it do at, 7:30 in the morning? What does it do at 5:30 in the afternoon? And we try and anticipate how that's going to operate. So this one didn't work so well either, and we didn't recommend it. And one of the things that we did then with this alternative H is we said, we got to solve this intersection problem. And we said, okay, what we can do is we're going to get rid of some of these left turners out of this intersection. And we made a one-way road that came around along the Maricopa Casa Grande Highway alignment and went under an extended version of the bridge over the railroad tracks. And what that did is it allowed people who wanted to go down to Maricopa Casa Grande Highway that would normally turn left here and then go there, they just had a free flow movement. It was almost like a ramp, but it was really just a one-way road. And it came around, and it took a bunch of left turners out of this intersection, and then it went to a level of service C. And we said, great, that passes, that works. And the other side benefit is that there was always concern about how you provide access to some of these businesses down in this area when you're building a bridge way up in the air, and how do you get to them? When you kept this little one-way road at existing ground level, all of a sudden then you could have access to those businesses, albeit off of a one-way road, but it kept some access there. And you notice that the right-of-way impacts and the cost were somewhere in between the other two, and we said, okay, this one works from a traffic operations perspective. We're going to recommend alternative H. And that's what we presented to you the last time we were here in December of 2015. And to explain a bit by why we're here again, I think it's important to understand the National Environmental Policy Act. This project is going to utilize federal funds, and any project that uses federal funds, the public agency has to go through this National Environmental Policy Act process, NEPA we call it, and it evaluates different potential effects to social, economic, natural resources, all those kinds of things. It provides an opportunity for you, the public, and other affected agencies to come and provide comments and inputs and direction on what we do. And it assists then in the final decision-making process. The input that we get from this helps decide what we're going to do. Like I said, that whole alternative G was developed primarily based on what we heard from the public. Okay? And so within a National Environmental Policy Act, you have to produce an environmental document of one kind or another. In this case, we developed what's called an environmental assessment, an EA. And what an EA does is it goes and it looks to see how well this project complies with the National Environmental Policy Act. And it evaluates a bunch of different things. It looks at the purpose and need. It looks at different alternatives. It looks at the environmental impacts of the alternatives, and evaluates a whole host of different types of criteria within that environmental realm that we have to think about. Things like land use, environmental justice, cultural resources, hazardous materials, all those kinds of things have to be examined and looked at with that document. And then again, it provides an opportunity for coordination with agencies and the public. The outcome of this document, when you look at it, it looks to see the significance of the potential impacts to these environmental factors. And there's one of two outcomes. Basically, one is a finding of no significant impact. That's a FONSI. It's not a Happy Days reference. It's just what we call it. And the other one is maybe a need for a higher level of evaluation called an environmental impact statement. In this particular case, we went through all the different scoping meetings and things. We looked at the public comment. We recorded all those things. And ultimately, it was decided that there was a finding of no significant impact, a FONSI, and that was issued in March of 2015. So whenever we go back and change something, so now we're talking about making some modifications to that alternative H, we have to go back and do what's called a reevaluation of the NEPA document. We have to make sure that it's still compliant with that National Environmental Policy Act. And again, it's looking to see is this finding of no significant impact, this FONSI, is it still a valid conclusion of that effort? And so we looked at all these, we have to relook at these different factors again to say, okay, has something changed here to where there is some significant impact that we didn't consider before? And so public input is very important to that process. That's why we're here again. And we want to hear your comments. We want to hear feedback. We'd like to hear all of those by July 28th of 2016. There are comment cards and input cards for you to provide that input. So on to the things that have changed since we were last here. One of the more significant things is that ADOT and the City of Maricopa, after years of effort, were awarded what's called a TIGER grant. TIGER stands for, I have to reread it every time, Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery. One of those cool federal acronyms. But that's what it stands for, and it basically says, okay, how can we generate some economic impact as a result of doing a project? And the state was awarded a $15 million grant to help build this project, and that was a great help. Funding was not entirely available when we were done with the study phase, and so we needed to identify funding sources, so this was a great help. But one of the things we have to do with this particular grant is we have to meet certain deadlines. There's deadlines. You can't just sit on this money for a decade or two. You got to do something with it. So we have very specific deadlines that we have to meet with this grant, or it might go away. So that's one of the reasons why we've been working very hard over the last several months to try and get this project moving, so we keep that grant in place when we go out and build this particular project. The other thing that we did is whenever you have a project of this particular size or magnitude, you go through what's called a value engineering process. And what it does is it brings a lot of experts in that have never seen this project, that don't know anything about it, and they're going to second guess everything that you've done to see if there's a better way to do it, if there might be a smarter way to do it, if there's some way you can reduce costs without reducing the benefit of the road or the capacity of the road or whatever it is. And in this case, we went through what's called a cost risk assessment and value engineering, a CRAVE process. And this looks at all the costs and the risks and tries to say, okay, what are these potential things that might come up? And if they come up, what are we going to do about them? How do we mitigate those risks? How do we try to avoid them? And then again, it looked at those value engineering questions. How can we do something better than what we've thought about before? And so there were people that came in and participated in that. ADOT was part of it. The city was part of it. And sat down and went through this whole effort and looked at different ideas. And some of those ideas came about because of things that had changed since we finished the study. There was a need to look at things from a different perspective. And the result of that CRAVE process, that value engineering process, are the revisions that we're going to talk about tonight. We ended up with a revised alternative H. And I want to walk through this with you to explain what the differences are, because it's hard to see. It looks very similar to alternative H. There's just some subtle changes that resulted in some big benefits to the project. First of all, I'm going to start at the south end. This is Altera Parkway down in here, Desert Cedars Drive. This is 347. With the original project, it went, because of this curve, and you can kind of see the road just wants to go straight through here. The original project went through this First Baptist Church right here, and it was going to need to be acquired in order to build the road. We heard a lot from the First Baptist Church after the study was done. We said, well, we need to respond to that input from the public, so we went about trying to see if we couldn't tighten up some things through here and go around it, and we believe we've successfully done that. So that was one of the changes. It goes around the Baptist Church, and the Baptist Church can stay. The other thing that happened was up here at the Amtrak station in this location. When we first planned this project, I recognized that there was not going to be enough money to build this whole thing at once. There just wasn't. And so what we did is we said, okay, how do we go about building this thing in parts and pieces? And what are the most important things to do first? And one of the things that had the highest cost-benefit ratio was get rid of the Amtrak station. Have it stop blocking the traffic, right? Some people would agree, I take it. And so that was one of the first things that we were going to do, was move that. And the city started looking at it. It was going to be a city project. And as they started looking at it, we were originally told by the railroad that this would be a $4.5 million project. But as you looked for a site and you found the site and you started looking at specific site issues like drainage and roadway impacts and other things, the cost of moving this started going up dramatically. In fact, it doubled. It went from $4.5 million to $9 million. So there was a question, do we really want to do that? And the other thing that happened was that Tiger grant was awarded, that extra $15 million. And what that did is it put the funds in place together with what the city had already been willing to contribute and what ADOT was willing to contribute, to where we didn't have to build this in parts and pieces anymore. The current plan is to build the whole thing at the same time. So if you're going to build this bridge over the top of the Union Pacific Railroad tracks, why move an Amtrak station? It's not in the way anymore. You're going to spend all these millions of dollars to move something that's not a problem once you build the bridge. So the decision was we really shouldn't move this facility. There's no reason to do it. And so we changed the alignment of two different roads up in here to try and keep that Amtrak station in place. And again, if you want to look at this in specific, these exhibits are much clearer than this image on the screen is. But we shifted the alignment of State Route 347 through here. Previously, this little one-way road came around and it went through the Amtrak station under one long bridge and came back this way. We couldn't do that anymore. So we had to tighten this curve up through here, and we had to split it into two different bridges, okay? There's one for the railroad, one for Maricopa Casa Grande Highway. And so we had to tighten those up so then we can avoid the Amtrak station. We can leave it in place. The historic Zephyr train car stays there, the Amtrak station stays there, and we just go up and over and we leave everything there, and we don't have to spend the money to move it. So that was one of the big changes through here. And then we brought the alignment back immediately thereafter. The other change had to do with this road. That was originally it was a one-way road that came around here, and it was just one-way traffic. We also had a little residential street in front of here. We didn't want all the residences on a one-way road. And when we moved Maricopa Casa Grande Highway back onto its existing alignment, we needed to change the way it operated a little bit so it could function for the residents there. And so what happened is we made this stretch of Maricopa Casa Grande Highway from here up to here two-way traffic. It's not one-way traffic anymore. It's going to be the same kind of road that's there today, one lane in each direction with a center turn lane down the median, but it will now have sidewalks and some bike lanes and things on it through this area. Um, when you come around, so if you're going on Maricopa-Casa Grande Highway, you go this way up to 347. And if you want to go to Maricopa-Casa Grande Highway coming south, you just stay on this road and there's no stopping all the way around, all the way down to Maricopa-Casa Grande Highway. There's no signals, there's no stop signs, there's no anything. It's free flow all the way through. And again, that takes those left turners out of this intersection that we're bogging it down. The other thing that we did is we put 2 lanes right here. One lane is just so you can go around and not stop all the way through. The other lane provides access to the businesses along there. There's going to all the driveways so people can come in and out, and they're not blocking that southbound movement anymore. They have their own kind of separate lane to go in and out of all those businesses, and it keeps that lane through here free flowing. Now when you come, if you're in one of these residences, for example, and you want to come up here, it now allows you to go this way and frequent these businesses. When you get to Garvey, you either turn left onto Garvey or you turn right. There's a little road there, it's hard to see, and you come back onto Maricopa-Casa Grande Highway. So we thought what it did, and I'll highlight then some of these changes here. You want to push the next button? So again, in summary, what we did is we avoided the Baptist church, we avoided the Amtrak station and the historic Zephyr. We provided a 2-way road through here that we believe provides better neighborhood access and frankly better business access in our opinion. And the last thing that we did is this road through here that brings Maricopa-Casa Grande Highway up to Honeycutt. It was getting into the driveways and some of the retention basins in here. We shifted it over about 5 feet right there just to make it a little easier to build and have less impacts. So right out here in front. Right out here in front. So you can see the summary of this. The cost of this alternative we think is about the same as what we had shown you before. The cost didn't go up. But what we did is the cost that we were going to have to spend to move an Amtrak station to buy additional right-of-way, we actually reduced how many total buildings we were impacting. So these are buildings. We reduced the total number of those with this particular alternative. One of the things that should be noted is that there was a residence right here that we thought we were going to have to take before. We don't have to do that anymore. But there were 2 residences right here that we didn't have to take the first time, and now they are going to have to be acquired with this alternative. So the residents went up by 1, the businesses went down by several, the total right-of-way amount that we needed went down. But the reason the cost stayed the same is we now have to build a second bridge, and one of the things you might notice, there's some green in here and some green over there. Those are the fill slopes, the slopes coming off the road. In order to save some of the homes and businesses down in here, we ended up putting walls through this area between the bridges and just after the bridges. So there was extra construction cost that was incurred. But the net effect, we believe, was a better alternative without increasing the cost. And that's the hope with value engineering, is that you end up with something that helps you better address the project needs. And so these are the 2 alternatives, again, side by side, and they're small. There are very large versions of them, 2 sets of them over here that you can look at. There's some smaller versions here and there that you can go take a look at. But again, to highlight, go back. Sorry. The original alternative went through the Baptist church. This one avoids it. The original alternative had that road that came around, and the other one went through the Amtrak station. Now we're avoiding that. And you can kind of see then this was a 2-way road, this was a 1-way road, and you can kind of see the differences. There was a little frontage road right here. Now it's just the same as it is today, just with sidewalks and bike lanes. To highlight these differences in right-of-way, right-of-way is the land that needs to be purchased for the road. That's what it's called, is right-of-way. And to highlight those differences, we put them here in color, and again, there's this exhibit right here behind the guy with the camera that you can look at in more detail if you want to see it. Some of the parcel lines are shown on here. They're approximate, they're not precise, but it gives you an idea of where things are. Everything that is in yellow is the revised alternative H. You can see the Baptist church. It comes around and goes around it. Everything that's in blue was the original alternative H from the design concept report, the DCR, and you can see that. And then what do blue and yellow make? Green. So everything that's in green is where they overlap. And you can kind of tell the differences between the 2 there. And so, where do we go from here? Well, again, as I talked about before, the feasibility study was done in 2007. We went through this environmental assessment and design concept report over a period of a couple of years there. We're now entering into final design. That's where we actually make the construction plans to go out and build something. And we're doing at the same time this reevaluation of the environmental assessment, and that's where we're at. Right-of-way acquisition, some of you may have been contacted by ADOT's right-of-way acquisition agents already. That's kind of a thing that's just getting at the beginning stages of going on. If your property is affected, you can expect that over the next 10 months that you'll have more interactions with them. So that's the other thing that's going to go on hand in hand with this effort. Construction, we expect to begin in the fall of 2017. And then, of course, whenever you build a road, you have to maintain it and make sure it's still working the way that you need to. So, with that, again, your input is important. There's lots of different ways that you can provide input, websites, comment cards. Again, we'll be answering some questions here tonight. You can meet with any of us afterward if you'd like at one of the exhibits. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Elijah. That was a very hopefully clear and concise overview of this project. So these question cards, I received 2 of them. Here's the deal. I know it's crowded, and we really want you to meet with the team members. So what I'll do is collect these quickly. If you want to pass them up, I'll read them and then have our project team address them. And I'll just take a few minutes to do this. But really, what we really want to do is get you to the project team members to ask the individual questions. Okay, reading glasses back on. Okay, first question. There is a wash ditch on the east side of 347 south of Desert Cedars Drive. Will that ditch be continued on the east side of the new alignment to drain flood water out of the Desert Cedars subdivision? We are currently in a designated flood zone and are trying to get out of it. This would help.
Okay, so that ditch, Paki, here's 2 more cards. That ditch is right down here where that State Route 347 logo is. It's on the east side. It comes through. There's a 24-inch pipe that comes under the road right there at Desert Cedars. And it goes in a ditch up till a head wall, then it goes into a storm drain that runs along that way. We're not going to be doing anything with that other than we have to continue to maintain that flow path the way that it is. The current plan is we're just going to catch it right there in that pipe and pipe it up to the same storm drain where it goes today. This is not a floodplain mitigation project. It's a road project. Obviously, the road is in a floodplain in certain locations, so we're going to have to make sure that we design the road in a way that it doesn't have an adverse effect on the floodplain. But we're not going to be doing anything with this project to change where the floodplain is at.
Okay, next question. How will we address this issue with the agreements with the Ak-Chin and the Gila River Indian tribe? Who would like to answer that from our project team? Or do we know that information yet? I think at this time we are working closely with the community and the GRIC, but we'll follow up. Thank you. Traffic flow and public safety. How will you work with Maricopa Police, Fire, Public Works, and others to ensure timely communication and traffic detours, et cetera, information to the general public? That's me. I will be sending you information. The website's been updated. We have the fact sheet. Once the construction begins, what I typically do is send out weekly traffic alerts. Hopefully you all signed in this evening and I get your email. That's the best way for me to send out information to all of you, and then we'll keep you updated. And the website will also stay updated.
That's a great question, is how do you maintain traffic during construction? And one of the whole points of these alternatives, even from way back when we had the first 10, was how do we keep traffic going on 347, just because there's no other real way around, right? You got to go down to Porter or Ralston, and they're miles away. And so one of the reasons why this alternative always looked at being off of the existing 347 is that so we can go out and build most of this while leaving all the traffic exactly the same as it is on 347. The road's going to be built over there. Everything's going to stay the same for a long period of time. What you're going to start seeing is when we have to make these connection points up in here and in here, then you'll see some disruption to State Route 347. But the plan is currently, and that may change, but the plan is to not start doing work over here on existing 347 until you can actually drive along the new 347. So we're thinking about traffic mitigation all along. We realize it's a big deal down in here, and that's part of the design process, is to figure out how we're going to keep traffic flowing through here. So the communication part is Paki's part of it. But it is in our minds when we do the design all the time.
Yeah, and the other thing too is we'll work closely with the designer and then the contractor to provide maps and how to get around and all of that. And one more thing is typically when we have a big construction project like this, we work very closely with all of the emergency responders in the community, so I coordinate those meetings as well. Is there going to be a sound barrier wall to keep the road noise controlled for the Heritage District?
That's a great question, and it kind of follows up with this other one that is, what is the noise impact to Desert Cedars and other communities? When we did the original study on this project, one of those environmental factors that we talked about that you have to evaluate is noise. We have to look at it, and that there was a noise evaluation done, there was testing that was done, and the conclusion of that is that the road noise is not the problem, it's the train noise. And so there was really no adverse impact from noise as a result of this improvement. Now, we are going to be doing another noise evaluation with this final design to see where everything is at again. So noise is a big deal. We continually monitor it, and that's the best answer at this time. At this time, it really was not an impact to the project.
Two more. I live in Desert Cedars subdivision, and we may have addressed this, but on the east side of 347, just south of the railroad tracks, how will the overpass construction affect the likelihood of flooding during and after? So much of our subdivision was recently determined to be in the floodplain, so.
Right, and the answer to that is the same as before. This is not a floodplain mitigation project, it's a road project, so our desire is to not have the floodplain change. We're looking at that closely and incorporating certain designs to keep it where it is. It will not solve the floodplain down near the Desert Cedars community. It's not part of the scope of this work.
Okay, last question before I let you guys go out to the team. Explain the north route in the current 347.
Okay, so I assume that means the northbound route. And I assume by current 347 you mean this revised alternative. And what happens if you're going northbound, there's 3 lanes going northbound. You'll continue on 3 lanes all the way through here. There'll be an intersection that takes you back to Honeycutt Avenue. There is a left turn bay that will be provided here with a driveway for the church and whatever else might go in there in the future. Then you're going to go up and over the railroad tracks. You're going to go over Maricopa Casa Grande Highway. And then at this point, you can turn right onto either Honeycutt Road or come back to Maricopa Casa Grande Highway. Continuing north, you'll go all the way up. There's Hathaway. There'll be a signal here, a traffic signal here, one here, and one here. So there's no new traffic signals. Today you have a signal at Maricopa Casa Grande Highway in 347. It's going to be moved over to Honeycutt. And so this route along here, there's no new signals being put in. There's already one here, there's one at Hathaway, there's one at Desert Cedars. There'll be the same number of signals. The only new signal is this one down here at Honeycutt where this road comes in. So yeah, that's the northbound direction. Oh, I should have mentioned one other thing, and I failed to do this, and I failed to do it at the beginning. Sorry. One of the things that changed from the original alternative is originally when we got to this point, we were just kind of tapering the road back to the 2 lanes that are in here today. When we looked at this, there's already 3 lanes right here at Edison Road going north. Instead of tapering it down, we're going to hold that 3rd lane all the way through. So now you have, hey, we did something right. Good. We try to do things right sometimes. And so you'll have 3 lanes all the way through, going all the way up. Save the best for last, I guess.
Good job. So with that, we just want to thank you so much for your time this evening. We appreciate the turnout. This community's been great, and we wish you luck moving forward. And we're all here. I'm going to have to move the chairs back out, but let's go out to the tables and meet with the study team or project team members. Thank you.